Well, no, we didn't hate him. He's just a sort of unique fellow. And he was constantly, imagine constantly dissing America and Americans on an American set. Didn't really fly very well. You know what I'm saying?
Let's look at the category Daredevil.
I don't know if that was Daredevil or just obnoxious. I don't know. One of the two. But in any event, no, I mean, Jason and I had some good scenes, like when he died. I just had a problem with Ivanova having all these love relationships, you know? Like they had the boyfriend of the month show up in season 1 or 2, and then they had the, you know, so I made a joke, and I said, you know, I think, just give me an alien or a woman. That was a joke, of course, and then he made me bisexual. But no, the whole Jason thing, this DeMarcus thing, it was a cute storyline. It was a cute storyline, but personality-wise, they did not belong together. That's just my opinion.
Both too strong-willed.
I think he was just, I don't know, maybe too romantic for her or something. I don't know. She was a very serious woman.
The scene where you
There seems to be technical difficulties, no?
the scene of Boom.
Oh, the what? I'm sorry, sir. What do you say?
The scene of Boom Shakalaka.
Boom shakalaka. You had to bring that up.
Was that done exactly as it was written, or did you add lyrics?
That was my punishment. That was my punishment for going to Joe when he was in his office during lunch break, and I went in there and I said, I am so sick of Ivanova having a pole up her butt. Can I please have something funny to do? And he gave me the boom shakalaka thing. And I was so, and he said, oh, by the way, and he handed me the script, he goes, you're the choreographer too. And I went, oh, come on, what is this? And I look at the thing and I'm supposed to be dancing, and I went, oh God, this is just embarrassing. It was a funny episode though. We'll do it my way next. It was a funny episode, but I have to say that dance was very embarrassing for me in front of a crew that I'm always being serious, so I basically told them they had one take to get it. That was back in the film days. I said, you're not going to burn any film because I'm only going to do this once, so you better cover the hell out of it. So that was my boom shakalaka experience. And then the other, of course, the other great story was when he got revenge upon Andreas and Peter. And that was the whole Andreas-Peter sex scene that nobody ever saw, but was written and was going to be shot.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you don't know that story? Okay, so Andreas and Peter were at a convention, and they told everybody in the audience, they thought it would be funny, they said, well, okay, when Joe comes out, nobody applaud. So Joe Straczynski comes out, and the creator of Babylon 5! And you're supposed to hear, wah! And it's crickets. And he walks out like this, and he just stands there, and everyone's like this. Because Peter and Andreas told them to. Well, Joe didn't like that. So he decided to exact his revenge by churning out this script, which we all received one morning when we got to work. It was a new script. We're paging through it, and open up on the scene post-coital, that's post-sex, on Londo and Jakar in bed after having sex. And we're all like, what? It's on the schedule? They had a prosthetic person come in to build Andreas a whole naked chest. He played it up until the very last minute when they were supposed to shoot it. They had him come on, both actors, in the whole thing naked, on the set, in the bed. He set up everything, and then finally he walked in and went. And that's when everybody could breathe. But no, he did that practical joke right up to the very, like, had the crew in there and everything. Now how are we doing?
Good.
Are we ready?
We're ready.
Okay, are you ready, folks? Thank you. I'm Claudia.
Hi, Claudia.
And I used to be an alcoholic. And those 3 words have set me free. Used to be. Not only have they set me free, but they've redefined who I am, and they've given me a new life. Now, am I perfect now? No. But I have learned to embrace my imperfections instead of allowing them to define me. And actually, it's my imperfections that have led me here today to speak to you. My imperfections have also given me my life's work as CEO of the nonprofit that I founded in 2013, C3 Foundation. I've been in one of the most exciting, demeaning, subjective careers for the past 35 years, the entertainment industry. Now, what an exciting term for something that, honestly, at times can be really boring and pedantic and repetitious. I mean, entertainment might be what you see on screen, but to be honest with you, sometimes shooting a television series or a film is anything but entertaining. I mean, it's boring. So this love-hate aspect of my career has always led me to find some things that would stimulate my mind, like writing books, fantasy novels, writing scripts, doing voiceovers, making music, studying cooking, languages, and drinking. Lots and lots of wine. You know, I've always loved playing heroes. I've done a lot of work like in NCIS and CSI and Criminal Minds playing cops and FBI agents, and I always like to solve the riddle or help somebody. I just love playing heroes. I played a lot of kick-ass warriors in games like Skyrim and World of Warcraft and Guild Wars and all sorts of other stuff, and I just always loved the idea of doing something heroic in life. And I wanted to do it in my real life as well. And I never realized that it might entail something potentially deadly to me. In spite of the ups and downs of working in the entertainment industry, my career has had one incredibly positive thing, and that is a platform to help other people. And over 3.5 decades of doing film and television and voiceover work, I have had the biggest blessing with my fans. They supported me when I came out with my own personal struggles. They didn't judge me. They weren't mean to me. They didn't shame me. They weren't doing online bullying. No, they supported me and they told me about their own struggles with addiction, food addictions, online addictions, porn addictions. I had all these stories of people that were reaching out to me, and that would constantly strengthen my resolve to make a difference, to let other people know that if they suffer from an alcohol addiction, there's hope. There's help. Every single day, my email is full of people, their pain, their desperation. They've been told that they're failures because they cannot stay clean and sober. But they have been failed by the same $35 billion a year so-called treatment industry that failed me. They are mothers and fathers. They're brothers and sisters. They are co-workers. They're friends. They're gay. They're straight. They're married, they're single. They are you and me. I'm here to tell you today not only how I'm making a difference, but how you can too. Now, statistically speaking, every single one of you, there's a very real possibility for this, that every single one of you in this room knows somebody that has suffered from an addiction. Maybe they drink too much once they start, or they say they're only going to have one and they have a lot. Maybe they can't stop once they started. And to take that even further, they say that about 1/3 of adults in America will struggle with an alcohol use disorder at some point in their life. Now, alcohol use disorder, or AUD for short, can happen to anybody. Trust me. AUD replaced the term alcoholism a few years ago when the medical professionals realized that alcoholism was too narrow of a term. So alcoholism was basically defined as when a person continued to drink even after alcohol had become problematic in their life. Now that helped perpetuate this rock bottom mentality that keeps people from seeking help until their lives are in a state of ruin. It discourages people from getting early treatment because there's this mistaken belief that anybody short of chronic alcoholism doesn't have a problem. Now, AUD can happen to anybody, any age, any nationality, rich or poor. It covers the spectrum of alcohol misuse from occasional binge drinking to the chronic, daily, addicted, dependent drinker. And it's expensive. Do you know that every single year, Americans spend over $250 billion, that's B with a B, billion, dollars a year fixing the harms of excess alcohol. And 72% of that $250 billion is paid for by businesses. Now, I was a very light drinker in my 20s, I was a social drinker in my 30s, and somewhere around my 40s, I suddenly realized that I had a problem. You know, there's this pervasive myth that people with an alcohol addiction are in denial that they have a problem. A rational person is supposed to stop something that they're doing that's hurting themselves and others. But addiction is not rational. You cannot reason with it. That's why the Just Say No campaign has failed so miserably. And if anything, the denial comes from the false belief that addiction is caused by a moral or spiritual failing. So we who suffer believe that if we pray harder or try harder, then we will find the strength to overcome our compulsive cravings, which just simply is not true. Well, my drinking was getting out of control. I was always the last person at the bar. When all of my dinner guests had switched to coffee, I was still slugging down wine. And then I found out that people were talking about my drinking behind my back. So I decided to do the rational thing. I went sober. I just quit drinking overnight. Now, according to popular treatment ideals, my decision to quit drinking should have solved my dangerous relationship with alcohol, right? Unfortunately, something very different happened. I would get triggered every time I would drive by a liquor store or walk by a pub. I would be angry and resentful that I couldn't have a drink like a normal person. I couldn't hang around my friends because they drank. So I started to isolate, and I became this very angry, bitter hermit. And what I didn't know at the time was that stopping cold turkey causes something called the alcohol deprivation effect. Basically, that's when the honeymoon phase of sobriety ends, and suddenly you're left with nothing but terrible physical compulsive cravings for alcohol. Alcoholics Anonymous call it white knuckling. And then when you relapse worse than you did ever before. You drink more, and then you relapse more. So, in essence, every attempt I made to quit drinking was actually making my drinking worse. It was an incredibly confusing thing for a born control freak, me, to have a control issue with alcohol, but believe me, I was not in control at all. In fact, I was swept up in a nearly decade-long battle with something I refer to as the monster. I mean, you can be the most disciplined person in the world. Doesn't matter. Once it has you in control, it is in control. Whether it's food, or gambling, or sex, or online addiction, or booze. Addiction is everywhere. When I finally realized that I was not in the driver's seat, that that monster was in the driver's seat, I did everything I could. I sought out every treatment that I could find or afford. I did talk therapy for $200 an hour. I found a hypnotherapist that said that he cured the Grateful Dead. That cost me $400 a session. I went to some swanky rehab place to basically talk about my childhood and do Tai Chi. That was 30 grand. I went to 12 different AA meetings in 2 different countries. I went macrobiotic. I got my chakras realigned. And I prayed. I prayed until my knees were black and blue. And I kept relapsing. And here's the thing. I wasn't drinking because I had a crappy childhood. I wasn't drinking because of any trauma I may have suffered. I mean, I had a great life. I was in the career that I loved. I just bought my dream home. I was redoing it. I had an amazing family, wonderful friends. I was drinking because I became physically addicted to alcohol. Period. People on both sides of my family have struggled with addiction, so it's in my genes. The combination of the genetic predisposition and doing the behavior, which is, in my case, is drinking, can cause addiction. Once you combine that genetic predisposition with the drinking, it just all goes to hell. So after trying everything that I could possibly do or afford, I came to one extremely clear conclusion, and that was that drinking wheatgrass juice in some swanky Malibu rehab facility was not going to fix my brain. My brain had become addicted, and that's what changed. So by the end of 2008, I was 6 months sober, and the monster in my brain started telling me that I didn't have an issue. And that's the insidious thing about addiction, is if you manage to control your addiction for a period of time, your brain tells you you're not an addict, right? So you think, okay, I can have a drink. It goes back to that false belief that addiction is a choice. So if I could choose to be sober for 6 months, then I had learned control, correct? So I listened to that nutty monster voice in my head, and I went to a restaurant and I had a glass of red wine, and I came home and I went, wow, that was easy. I'm not an addict. I had 1 glass. I'm good. Right. You know where this is going. The next night I had 2 glasses. The following night I had 3 glasses. And then I was buying bottles and bringing them home, and then suddenly I was drinking hard alcohol and I was crying and hallucinating. Once again, I went cold turkey like I always did. But this time, something went terribly wrong. I started losing motor control, and I started having small seizures, and I thought, I'm going to have a stroke, and I'm going to die right here if I don't get professional help. So I had a friend take me to this detox center, and it was probably the most humiliating, shameful experience in my life, because the people were so cold, and so mean. The second I got the medication that I needed to stop shaking, I just got the hell out of there. I mean, it was really demeaning. And I thought to myself, wow, even those people have given up on me. Seems like the whole world has given up on me. On the way out, I grabbed some flyers, one of which promised to get rid of cravings for alcohol forever. It was a shot. It was like $1,200 a month, and at that point said, you know what, I'll sell my car. I don't care. I'll try anything. Really, I was that desperate. Now, you might think that a person that has an addiction is desperate for their next fix or their next drink or their next donut, but no, we are desperate for recovery. Many of us are desperate for help so that we can stop hurting ourselves and our families, stop hurting our health or our reputation or our employment status. We are desperate to believe that the medical and addiction professionals who tell us that we can will our way through sobriety one day at a time, and when willpower doesn't work, we're desperate to make our shame and our fear go away, often by relapsing again. Traditional treatment is failing people at an alarming rate. The World Health Organization estimates that 3.3 million people die every year from alcohol-related causes. Now that's more than malaria, tuberculosis, AIDS. It's a lot more than the opioid deaths, yet it doesn't get nearly the amount of attention. Americans are dying from alcohol-related causes at rates not seen in decades. Multiple researchers estimate that 80 to 90% of people who are suffering from an AUD don't even seek treatment. And the National Institutes of Health estimate that 90% of those who do seek treatment are relapsing within the first 4 years. Now let me say this again, because this is very important. For every 100 people who need treatment, only 10 are seeking treatment, and only 1 out of those 10 is expected to recover after the first try. Can you think of any other treatable disease that has that abysmal of a success rate? No?
No.
Unfortunately, it gets worse. Studies show that the traditional way of treating people, making them hit rock bottom and shaming them and tough love and humiliating them, isn't making them any better. In fact, it's making them worse. To quote Dr. Keith Humphreys from Stanford University, it's remarkable that people believe what's needed is more punishment. If punishment worked, there wouldn't be any addiction. It's a pretty punishing experience. Well, he's right. It is punishing. And if those of us struggling with addiction had a normal disease or chronic condition, we would be treated with sympathy and love. And instead, we're faced with a barrage of, why can't you just say no? Why can't you just quit? And really a lack of understanding or compassion. The American Medical Association first labeled alcoholism as a disease of the brain in 1956. So what other disease can you think of that requires people to hit rock bottom before they seek treatment? Would a doctor withhold insulin from a diabetic after they fall into a diabetic coma from eating too much sugar? Would we tell a person whose cancer didn't respond to treatment that they were the ones who failed and they should work harder to make that treatment work for them? Standing back and watching while a person loses their job and their family and their health and their dignity and self-respect before encouraging them to get help is cruel and barbaric, and yet this is how people with an addiction are treated every single day all over the world by their friends and loved ones, and even by people in the addiction treatment industry. It's little wonder why so many people lose hope. One day, not too long ago, I was sending and receiving emails, and I got an email from a fellow that served in Afghanistan, and he had an issue with alcohol. He was telling me about his overbearing father and his profound loss during the conflict, not just loss of his friends, but loss of his own identity. He felt like he was losing his mind. He couldn't think straight. Then he went on to describe the post-traumatic stress disorder that he suffered upon coming home, despite the fact that he was now reunited with his wife and young children who were giving him love and attention. He was just caught up in this hellish limbo that so many soldiers experience when they come home to this now foreign reality. So he drank. He drank to feel normal. He drank to forget. He drank to his dead friends. He drank to the living ones. He just drank, and he drank to the point where it was starting to destroy him. And this man, this hero, this person who risked his life for our country, at the end of the day, what did he refer to himself as? An alkie. That's it. That is what defined himself to him. Not a warrior, not a soldier, not a Marine, not a father, not a son, no. In all of his humanity and experience, he defined himself only as an addict. With all of the technological advancements in medicine and science in the last 100 years, is this really the best we can do? Why are we still relying on the same methods for combating alcohol addiction that were established in the 1930s? Why do we continue to punish people for showing symptoms of the chronic condition that they're seeking help for? The more I learn about the addiction treatment industry and their obsession with sticking to mainly talk therapy and 12-step programs, the angrier I get. There are FDA-approved medications, and they've been available since the 90s. You know, we already know that people can unlearn behaviors and replace them with new ones, even when addiction is present. That's the basis of behavioral therapy. But when addiction is biological, like it was for me, people need more than simply talking about the problem. They need medication. And thankfully, there's a very simple, inexpensive one that I've been on since 2010 called the Sinclair method. After that last horrible detox, I was researching that flyer, and I found out that the active ingredient was a medication called naltrexone that's been FDA approved since 1994 for use for AUD, and it's an opiate blocker, so you can't get high off of it. This is not a replacement drug therapy. Nobody can abuse naltrexone. It's not addicting. Nobody's ever overdosed from it. In fact, in low dose, they use it for things like MS and fibromyalgia and Crohn's disease and chronic pain. So that's not all I found. This book popped up, and it was by Dr. Roy Escapa, and it was called The Cure for Alcoholism, which was a rather lofty title, but I bought it, and I started reading the chapters, and it explains something called the Sinclair method, or TSM. And the way it works is a person takes naltrexone, then they wait an hour, so it gets into the blood and the brain, and then they drink alcohol. I know, that sounds totally counterintuitive, but it's absolutely necessary for pharmacological extinction to occur. Here's why it works. When a person with an addiction drinks, they get a huge reward from alcohol, which makes them want to compulsively drink more. Well, when you take an opiate blocker like naltrexone, instead of the alcohol reinforcing the addictive synapses in the brain, the medication blocks the endorphins from being released and keeps them from activating the part of the brain responsible for addiction. In layman's terms, imagine this. You've got a room full of endorphins living in your brain, and every time you drink, they run out of the room and they raise hell. So, when you drink on an opiate blocker, not only does the opiate blocker shut the door, but it locks those endorphins in so they can't even get out. Then the body is slowly detoxed over a period of days or weeks, depending on the person. Drinking levels are dramatically decreased because cravings are extinguished. So I couldn't find a doctor to prescribe me naltrexone. Nobody even knew about it, so I ordered it online from an Indian pharmacy. It's the only way I could do it. I got the pills after a few weeks. I made myself dinner. I was scared to death. I thought, what if I'm one of the small percentage of people this doesn't work for? I'm going to relapse and now I'm going to die, because the last relapse was so horrible. But I was desperate because the cravings were kicking in again. I poured myself that glass of wine, and an hour after I took naltrexone, I took one sip of it, and I was like, meh. I ate my dinner. That wine just sat there. I poured it back into the bottle. Previously unheard of, by the way. I had no cravings, no compulsions, nothing. About 3 months after starting TSM and sticking to it, I had my huge aha moment, and there was this billboard in my neighborhood that had a giant glass of red wine, my poison, on it. And every time I used to drive by that when I was drinking, it would trigger me to want to drink. And if I was sober, it would trigger me to get ticked off, because I couldn't drink. So this time, I drove by that same billboard with a giant glass of wine, and my brain said, that's a billboard with a glass of wine on it. Now that may not mean much to you, but to me, I had to pull over because I was weeping so hard. It meant that my brain was fixed. It meant that I was me again. That meant that I was normal again. After a few months after that, I didn't even think about drinking. I was sober most of the time, except for the occasional planned drink 1 hour after taking naltrexone. Life was normal again after a decade of alcohol-fueled desperation and frustration. So TSM worked so well for me that I decided to write a book about it. And the feedback from that book really inspired me to open my nonprofit. At the time, I thought maybe there's just a lack of awareness. People don't know about this medications for alcohol use disorder. Maybe loved ones don't know about it, but it wasn't that easy. In spite of 120 clinical trials worldwide that are peer-reviewed, that have been conducted on naltrexone, the addiction community has actively shunned using medicine to treat alcohol addiction. And medication for harm reduction, forget about it. I mean, 5 years ago, that wasn't even heard of. Your choice was literally abstinence or ruin your life. Abstinence or death. So after finding a solution for my biological addiction and starting a nonprofit, I realized that I still really wasn't done yet, because I couldn't shake this anger I had to God. I mean, why did he do this to me? I'm a good person. I'm generous, I'm loving, I help people, I help my family, my friends. Why did he decide to take a decade of my life from me? And the answer came to me when I was reading that email from that young man, that Marine that I mentioned earlier. His words literally moved me to tears, that he did not give up. He sat there late at night Googling alcohol addiction, whiskey in hand, and stumbled across my TEDx talk. He wasn't giving up. He was looking for information. He watched the entire talk. The next day he called the VA. He got himself a prescription for naltrexone. He went on it. He complied. And within a few days, his mind started to clear. His drinking decreased. He started to see his wife and children. He started to really see into his pain, and he started to crawl his way out of that alcoholic haze. And he started treatment for PTSD. At the end of his email, he thanked me, little old me, for saving his life. I realized that all of my complaints to God or Mother Nature or the higher being or whatever, my questions for them making me suffer, all of it became crystal clear. If I had given up, if I hadn't kept looking, if I wasn't desperate, if I had never suffered from addiction, where would I be right now? I would be living the exact same life I've been living for the past 35 years. I'd be an actress, I'd be doing the occasional gig, writing my books. Would I even be alive today? Maybe not. I know one thing for sure, I wouldn't be receiving emails like that make me so excited 7 days a week to actually help people. I mean, I've found my life's passion, and now I know that finding one's life passion sounds really aspirational and lofty, and the reality is we all have to put food on the table and do jobs that perhaps we don't even like. But it is possible to incorporate giving back into your day-to-day life simply by sharing the information that you're hearing here today. My dream is a world in which every single person who struggles with addiction to alcohol receives treatment with dignity and respect and kindness. A world where doctors and therapists understand the very real biological and genetic aspects of addiction and offer proven medical treatments like the one that I'm on. A world where doctors embrace a very inexpensive, easy solution with a 78% long-term success rate. By the way, that World Health Organization statistic that I read out to you about 3.3 million people dying every year, that translates to one person dying every 10 seconds. And that means that since I've been standing up here, 240 people have needlessly died. 240. Mothers and fathers, daughters and sons. Is our current addiction treatment system really the best that we can do? Earlier, I asked you to think about somebody that you might know that has an addiction or who's suffering. Maybe you thought about somebody who always says they're just going to have one drink, or somebody who plans social occasions just around drinking. I want to make sure that you have hope for these folks that you're thinking about, or even if you feel like alcohol has too much influence on your own life. The first thing I want you to do is stop believing that myth that people have to hit rock bottom and fall into dire straits before they can get help. Rock bottom is cruel. It's unnecessary. And it's a dangerous concept to have as a first indicator that a person needs help with addiction. After all, rock bottom, for some people, is death. And you can't recover from death. And there's a second thing that I'd like you to remember, is that harm reduction is a valid treatment outcome. Think about it. What does harm reduction mean? It means to reduce harm. And this all or nothing treatment mentality keeps far too many people from seeking treatment. Imagine you tell a 20-year-old you can never have a drink again and for the rest of your life. It's kind of unrealistic and it's daunting for that individual. So harm reduction is a very, very real treatment outcome. You also can detox at home with the Sinclair method, so you don't have to go through the humiliating experience that I did. It's safe, and once again, it's inexpensive. It helps a lot of people. If there's one thing that you take today, please let it be this. Just never give up. Don't give up on yourself, but don't give up on those individuals that you see suffering, or those people who need help, whether they're your friends or family or your employees. If traditional treatment didn't work for them, please just suggest to them that they look into the Sinclair method or other medications. I am a believer of everything. You can combine this medication with AA, this medication with Smart Recovery. Just please let them know that there are medications out there available. Believe me, I was skeptical and petrified to try it, but hope is incredibly powerful, but science is even more powerful. You know, one of the most commonly quoted phrases in the recovery industry is the serenity prayer. And it goes, God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Well, now is the time to change the things that we can no longer accept. Change is not easy, and changing a treatment industry based on 300 years of abstinence is not going to be easy. Trust me, I've tried. And since the rehab industry is a multi-billion-dollar revolving door, I'm sure that they don't appreciate me standing up here talking about a very cheap, easy solution that actually works. But I have to. It hasn't always been easy sharing openly about my own struggles, but I've drawn courage from every single person who's reached out to me to share their own stories. My heart aches every time somebody tells me that they wish they would have known about TSM before their mother died, or their daughter died. And every morning I wake up knowing that science has uncovered a better path to recovery, and I'm energized, and I'm enthused knowing that I can